Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into mastering English listening skills.
Ooh, sounds exciting.
And to help us out, we're going to be looking at this awesome podcast episode called Master Your English Listening Skills.
Okay, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's great. It's like we're right there in the classroom with this English teacher, Alex.
I like Alex, yeah.
And he's guiding this learner, Liam, through all sorts of tips and tricks.
So like we're shadowing them as they learn.
Cool. Exactly. You'll be picking up stuff right alongside Liam.
I love that.
So one of the big things this podcast emphasizes is just the power of listening to English every single day.
Really? Even if it's like just for a few minutes?
Yeah. They say even 10 minutes can make a difference. What do you think about that?
Interesting.
I mean, we've all heard that practice makes perfect, but this podcast really dives into why that is.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. It's like our brains are basically wired to learn through repetition, through, constant exposure.
So it's like building a muscle, but for language.
Totally. And it's not just about recognizing individual words either.
Oh, okay.
The more you listen, the more you start picking up on all these little cues, like
Like what?
like the rhythm of the language, the intonation, the way native speakers kind of connect their ideas,
Oh, I see what you mean. Like you start to kind of predict what's coming next almost.
Exactly. So thinking about our deep dive here,
Yeah.
how can someone listening to us right now actually put this into practice?
Ooh, good question. I think this podcast had some really good practical advice, actually.
Like what?
Well, they talked about using things like podcasts, obviously, but also audiobooks, YouTube videos.
Oh,
even.
YouTube. Yeah, I love YouTube.
Right. And they even said watching shows on Netflix can be super helpful.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And starting with subtitles can be a good way to ease into it. And
then go without them once you're feeling brave.
Exactly. Just to challenge yourself a bit.
I love that.
So what else did they talk about? Oh, active listening.
Okay, yeah, active listening. Could you break that down for us a little?
Sure. So active listening is basically about going beyond just hearing the words.
Okay.
It's about like really engaging with what you're listening to.
Engaging how?
By paying close attention to things like the speaker's intonation, like are they asking a question or making a statement?
Right.
Or the pauses they take and the words they emphasize.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's like you're searching for clues or something.
Yeah, like you're a detective, but for language.
I like that. So any tips on how to actually do that?
Well, they had this cool technique they called pause and predict.
Pause and predict, okay.
Yeah, so you basically listen to part of a sentence, pause the audio, and try to guess what the next word's going to be.
Oh, that's fun. Like a little game.
Yeah, and it's a good way to train your brain to anticipate what's coming.
Okay. I can see how that would be helpful.
It definitely helps with overall comprehension.
Speaking of helpful techniques, the podcast also talked about shadowing.
Oh yeah, shadowing.
Classic. Could you, for anyone who's not familiar,
Right.
could you explain what shadowing is and why it's so good for your listening?
So shadowing is basically when you listen to a native speaker and then you repeat what they're saying immediately after.
Immediately, wow.
Yeah, like you're their shadow, hence the name.
Okay.
It can feel a little weird at first, but it's really effective because it forces you to focus on both the sounds and the rhythm of what they're saying.
So you're basically training your brain and your mouth at the same time.
Exactly. By mimicking a native speaker, you're basically teaching yourself to produce those sounds more naturally.
Oh, that's really cool. Now, what about transcripts? Do you think it's good to use those while shadowing or not?
That's a good question. While transcripts can be helpful, if you're trying to understand a difficult word or phrase, this podcast really emphasizes doing it without relying on the text.
Oh, interesting.
By focusing only on the sounds, you're letting your brain adapt to the natural flow of spoken English,
Yeah, like you're not relying on those visual cues.
Exactly.
So far, we've been talking about British and American accents mostly.
Right.
But what about all the other accents out there? How important is it to be able to understand different accents?
That is a super important point, and the podcast actually talks about this directly.
Oh, good.
They highlight the fact that English is spoken in so many different ways all over the world,
Yeah, for sure.
And each one has its own pronunciation, rhythm, even vocabulary sometimes.
So it's like a whole different world of English out there.
Basically. And being able to understand a variety of accents is a really valuable skill, especially nowadays.
Makes sense. But it can be pretty daunting, especially if you're just starting out.
For sure.
Yeah.
So any advice on how to tackle this?
Yeah, how do you even begin to get comfortable with all these different accents?
Yep. Well, one of the best things you can do is to actively seek out different listening materials.
Different from what you normally listen to.
Exactly. The podcast recommends things like trying out podcasts from different countries, watching movies or TV shows.
Ooh, with actors from different places, yeah.
Exactly. Or even just talking to people who have different accents.
That's a good idea. It's like immersing yourself in the diversity of English.
Yeah, it's about opening yourself up to all the richness of the language.
I love that. So we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
We've talked about listening consistently, active listening, shadowing, all these different accents.
It's a lot.
But this is just the beginning. What are your thoughts on everything so far?
What really stood out to me was how the podcast emphasizes how connected listening and speaking are.
Oh, interesting.
They were saying that by improving your listening, you're also setting yourself up to be a better speaker.
So it's like a two-way street.
Exactly, like building a bridge between understanding and actually expressing yourself.
I see. That's really insightful.
And that brings us to this really interesting question that the podcast asks its listeners.
Ooh, I'm intrigued. What's the question?
They ask, what one strategy from everything we've discussed are you going to try this week to improve your English listening skills?
Wow, that's a good question.
Right. It's like a call to action.
It is. It's about taking all this information and actually doing something with it.
Exactly. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's take a quick break and then we'll come back to this question in more detail.
Sounds good. We'll also dive into some more strategies for improving your listening and share some of our own experiences.
Yes. Stay tuned.
We'll be right back.
You know that question about which strategy we'd commit to? That really got me thinking.
Yeah, it's easy to just talk about this stuff.
But actually putting it into practice, that's the real challenge.
Totally. It's like you can have all the tools in the world,
but if you don't use them...
what's the point?
Exactly. So to bring it back to you, what stood out to you that you'd want to, try out?
That's a good question. I'm really intrigued by that shadowing without transcripts.
Ooh, yeah.
It sounds tough, but I think it could be really effective.
It'd force you to really listen, you know?
Yeah, no relying on the written words.
Just your ears?
For me, it was that whole thing about seeking out different accents.
Oh, yeah.
I tend to stick to American and British accents mostly.
Well, it's comfortable, right?
Yeah, but I realize I'm kind of missing out.
There's a whole world of English out there.
Exactly. And it's not just about understanding.
It's about appreciating how the language has evolved.
It's it's traveled all over the world.
It's picked up all these different flavors along the way.
I love that analogy, like a tapestry or something.
Yeah, with threads from everywhere.
And when you expose yourself to that,
you become a more well-rounded listener.
You know, Liam, the learner in the podcast, he was pretty intimidated by all the different accents at first.
It's a common fear, yeah.
But Alex made a good point. The more you immerse yourself,
the less scary it becomes.
Like anything, the more you practice,
the easier it gets.
And there's so many fun ways to do it.
Right. Like one day you could listen to an Australian podcast.
And then the next day, it's a news report from India.
Exactly. Or watch movies from different countries.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's like taking a language vacation.
And don't forget about talking to real people.
Oh, yeah. If you have the chance, definitely do that.
Real life conversations. Nothing beats that.
But even with all these strategies, we got to remember.
Yeah.
Improving your listening takes, it takes time.
There's no quick fix.
It's journey.
And there will be bumps along the way.
You'll come across accents that just,
totally throw you off.
And you'll get frustrated sometime.
And you can't understand every word.
But the important thing is to just keep going.
Don't give up.
Even native speakers don't catch every word all the time.
That's true. We use context, intonation, all those things.
To fill in the blanks.
One of the best things the podcast said, I thought.
What was that?
Was about having a growth mindset.
Oh, I love that.
It's about seeing those challenges.
As opportunities to learn.
Shifting your perspective.
From I can't to I'm learning.
Exactly. And it all comes back to that question.
The big question.
What will you do this week?
We want to hear from you, listeners.
What are you going to try?
What are you excited about?
Share your thoughts, your struggles, your successes.
We're all in this together.
And remember, even small steps
can lead to big results over time.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, Let's all think about one small step
Just one.
that we can take today.
To get a little bit closer to our goals.
We've explored a lot of great ideas
But now it's up to you.
to take action.
And remember,
We're here to support you every step of the way.
we'll be back in a moment to finish up this deep dive and leave you with some final thoughts.
Wow, it's amazing how much we've covered just from looking at one podcast episode.
I know, right? Makes you realize how much you can learn just from listening.
If you listen the right way, that is.
Exactly. Active listening, remembering those key takeaways, it all makes a difference.
We talked about consistent exposure, different accents, shadowing, even that growth mindset idea.
It's like we've assembled this whole toolkit for better listening.
And like you said before, tools are meant to be used.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask again, what are you going to do with all these tools this week?
It's all about taking action, right? Turning knowledge into results.
You got it. That's what really resonated with me from that podcast, how Alex kept emphasizing the journey aspect of it.
Oh yeah, I like that too.
That it's not about reaching some imaginary finish line.
It's about constantly improving, discovering new things.
And even those moments where you stumble.
Like when you encounter a tricky accent and just can't,
Yeah, those are actually valuable.
there are opportunities to learn.
It's all about how you frame it, instead of getting discouraged.
You get curious. Curious about what you can learn from that experience.
Exactly. So, to everyone listening out there,
What's one small step you can take today? Just today, to improve your English listening.
maybe it's finally subscribing to that podcast you've been meaning to check out.
Or watching a YouTube video with a speaker from a different country.
Whatever it is, remember every little bit counts.
Hey, don't forget, we're all on this journey together.
Share your experiences, your challenges, your aha moments.
We can learn so much from each other.
Absolutely. So until next time,
Keep those ears open, those minds engaged.
and never stop being curious about the world of English.
Happy listening, everyone.